It's time. It's time for women to live better. It's time to feel healthier. It's time to live longer. It's time to enjoy your routines. It's time to understand your body and your mind. Welcome to It's Time with myself, Dr. Jen Wagner, and my partner, Linsly Donnelly, powered by Prosper. Thank you for joining us today. This podcast is designed to provide general information. It does not in any way establish a patient-doctor relationship or provide other professional services, such as medical advice. Please contact your appropriate healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle or routine.
Jen, I feel like we've talked about this idea of the 4 pillars, and we're going to go deep on each one of them, and we've promised that there's going to be these episodes that go with experts to help us navigate the kind of nuance of each one. But it still feels like, if there's only one episode people have time to listen to, or only one episode that they share, this would be it, right? This is kind of our block and tackle. We've done all this deep diving and synthesizing and action, making it operationalizing. And this is what we would say, go do.
Absolutely. Yes.
And we start with the first one always, right? Move. But what does that mean? If we were to break that down to the next level of action item for people, for midlife women wanting to live better now and in the long haul, what do we do?
So first is, I think we have to break down some stereotypes about how what society tells us how we should be moving.
Yes. Maybe how we should have been moving when we were 20.
Right. And so, a lot of people have used this analogy. When we go to join a new gym, we're shown the cardio section and what classes there are. And we kind of walk right by the weights.
Right. Especially the big ones.
Especially the free ones that you have to manipulate. Maybe you get shown a few machines. And I think that is just kind of a cultural norm that we have to break down, that as we age and as we lose estrogen and we lose that anabolic stimulus, we have to find other ways to replace it. And so one of those non-pharmacologic ways is by lifting heavy weights.
Okay. I think we have to pause here, because I feel like I've heard this 100 times, and obviously you've heard it and taught it and I've lived it, but I still don't think it gets into people's minds clearly enough. For women, estrogen is testosterone. I mean, I know we have testosterone also, but for women, that's what estrogen does.
Mm-hmm.
Helps us build muscle.
Yes.
Some other things. And we lose it, and we start to lose it in perimenopause. We've lost it in postmenopause. That is a 12-year horizon. And then we've got hopefully 40 years after that.
Right.
So it is game change time.
Game change.
The minute we're in perimenopause, we need to do something that does what estrogen does. And lifting heavy weights is the tool.
It is the tool. And it not only changes our muscles, more importantly, it changes how our central nervous system fires into those muscles.
Okay.
And therefore, we can re-stimulate those type 2 or faster fibers by the way we train. We can increase the strength of contraction by the way the neurologic signals are coming in. And so it's building our muscles, lifting weights, but it's also building our brains and re-enhancing those connections, which is really important. It is also changing the metabolism, the way our muscles are using fuel. Okay. And so we lose, for glucose to get into our muscle cells, it has to have a transporter. And estrogen helps facilitate some of that transport of glucose into our muscles so it can be used effectively. So this is why our muscles become less adept at using glucose when we lose our estrogen. Our glucose levels go up, we get some insulin insensitivity. So again, lifting those heavy weights and stressing the muscle in that way increases one of the transporters for glucose, one of the membrane transporters.
Okay.
So we can start to use glucose more effectively, which is really important too to maintaining our metabolic health.
Right. So that boils down to the gripe we hear a lot, and understandably, is the things I was doing aren't working anymore, and I need help on my body comp. And it's because we were told, just burn calories, just do cardio, and we'll talk about nutrition in a minute, but it was ideally do that cardio without food in your stomach. Totally wrong and different, especially at this point in life. When you say lift heavy, because I'm somebody who's actually lifted weights for, decades. And what I learned about lifting heavy was you want to have somebody get form right for you. No question.
Absolutely.
You got to start slow. There's a ton of videos that we'll talk to in the show notes. I think we'll even have an episode where you're demoing and some of our expert advisors are demoing. But it's lifting more weight for fewer reps.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a way, if somebody wants to go try tomorrow and they feel confident in the gym, it's lifting enough weight so that you want to stop after 4 to 6 reps. Very different than the 8 to 12. I think we've often been.
Right. And I think the other really confusing part of this is people feel like they're going to walk out of the weight room looking like the old Gold's Gym days, these big burly muscles. And that's actually not what this is doing. That is actually how we get more with those higher rep count, lower weight, is that more of that hypertrophy. This is really building more strength. And so that shouldn't be the forefront of people's concerns when we talk about lifting heavy. Friend who's the ultimate expert in this area, Dr. Stacy Simms, her kind of newest thing that I've heard her say a lot recently is hold 2 reps in reserve. So your weight is probably correct for you if you can do 6 and you think you can squeak out 2 more, but you don't.
Okay.
And so, and again, this is not walking into the gym, picking up the heaviest thing you can first and foremost. It is having someone around to teach you proper form.
Yep.
It is often starting with body weight and building up, and then layering in other types of exercise with it.
Yeah. I think one thing that's exciting about Lift Heavy, though, is it doesn't take, 2 hours, right?
No, it's
20, 25 minutes, and you rotate body parts. You're looking at targeting 3 to 4 times a week, and ideally getting each body part in twice. But even if you get in each body part just once, then you double up on one other body part or that 4th time, it's not super time intensive. You're getting in there, it's 25 minutes, maybe 30.
And, it can also be combined with some of the other things that we're talking about. And so it's not completely abandoning your routine, especially if you enjoy your routine. It can be small modifications. So I know, you and I feel like are the champions of this, that, we often take a HIIT class together, and sometimes it is, okay, they say the rep count is 8 or 10.
Yeah.
I'm going to do 6 and just lift heavier. And it's the same time. It's not disruptive to anyone else. What I've noticed since you and I have started doing that, more people have started to do that too, which is kind of fun.
Good. And then who's Boko, she says, go write your own script in this class. I'm here as your guide. And so I think other studios are understanding this too.
Right. And so I think that it is not about telling you need to go to the gym for 2 hours. I mean, this is stuff you can do at home. There's lots of ways to incorporate this.
And so lift heavy means lift heavy for your muscles, so skeletal muscle, as well as for bone building.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then obviously the cognition, rewind, we describe it. You're doing it because it's building your muscle. And like we talked about in a prior episode, at 40 or 50, you're trying to build this really big baseline.
Right.
And we're going to decay. We know that. So we're trying to build a bigger baseline now. And lifting heavy is one way for you to get that for the muscular skeletal system and for your bones.
Okay. And then I think the other really important thing in exercise that I just want to make sure we cover is there's so much talk about zone 2 and doing 150 minutes of zone 2 per week. And the American Heart Association is putting that out there. Like lots of very, very reputable organizations are saying this is what you need to do. So take us through that. Well, first of all, what is zone 2? Well, what does that mean?
I think that is, I'll say layperson's term, because it is a big question. It's like, how do you even know what zone 2 is? And it's corresponding to your level of cardiovascular intensity. And so you're trying to stay at something that people also might use the term RPE, or perceived rate of exertion, or I've got my acronym.
Rate of perceived exertion. You got it.
Rate of perceived exertion, which is like at a 6 or 7. So if we were out on a trot together, we could talk, but I wouldn't be huffing and puffing out of breath, but I would also be feeling it. And so that's kind of zone 2. And as you move through the zones and you get to a higher intensity, you're at the higher intensity level where maybe you can't even talk. You're at RPE.
Okay.
So that's the layperson's example. Now for the doctors.
No, I think that's perfect. I mean, so it's exactly that, is that you can speak in short sentences while moving.
Right.
And you should be able to move for an extended period of time doing that. So you're at a level, some say 4 or 5 on an RPE scale, some say a little bit higher, but you're at a level where you can move continuously for 45 minutes or an hour, speaking in short sentences, but you're not overly winded.
Bike ride with friends, you're not tapping out after a minute of doing it, right? It's like, this is a level that you could just truck on it and you feel like you got a good workout, which is kind of what people respond to.
And I think, the reason this is not as effective movement, and I want to emphasize the word effective because, like we said, any movement is better than no movement.
Right.
So we never want to discourage people from moving. But the reason it's not as effective, especially in our perimenopausal period, is we are not getting the stress enough to initiate those central nervous system changes, to initiate some of those metabolic changes in our muscles because we are not stressing them enough.
Right.
And women are kind of teed up to our free fatty acid metabolism is more efficient than men. And so men really need to get into that zone too to activate that part of our metabolism. And we're already a step ahead in that direction.
Okay.
So,
Well, I think this is a big one because when you say think about how is this effective, people only have so many minutes in the day. Move no matter what. But if you're at the point in your movement calendar and you're like, how do I get the biggest bang for the buck? In terms of cardiovascular health and strength, it's not zone 2 for women, right? It's sprint interval training or hit interval training. And that's a very different kind of activity pattern and duration requirement, which is good news. It's more effective with less time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Do you want to explain the difference between those two?
Yes, I will, because I'll love to try to do it in the layperson account, and then you're going to fine tune it with all of the correct science to back it up. So when I think of these two, I think of sprint interval training is an all-out sprint. Like you cannot even go longer than fill in the blank, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, no more than a minute. You're pouring it out as fast as you can, and then you have to stop and recover. That recovery interval could be, you might sprint for 30 seconds and you might need a full 90 seconds to recover. But it is full out, and then you're stringing those together in clusters. And I think, again, Dr. Stacy Simms does a great job of describing how to operationalize this. Where you've got 4 clusters like that, and then you have a recovery cluster of 4 minutes, and then 4 clusters and a recovery cluster, and then 4 clusters. So the whole workout might be 25 minutes, maybe 30, with a warm up and a cool down, but it's intense. You feel weight. And the contrast to that might be in HIIT, where it's interval matching, right? So it's high intensity. You're feeling it, and you're maybe at an 8 at that RPE, and you might match it 30 seconds, or 2 minutes to it. It is more common. You might run into that in a class. So you can do those two. I think my takeaway after reading and doing a lot of these activities is I feel like if I can only get 20 minutes done in a day, I'm going to go for this. But when I'm in something like a class at the BOCO, and a lot of people do something else like Nourish Theory or at 45, you can take that part of the class that's cardio and make it into HIIT pretty easily.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think, the sprints, sometimes it's under 30 seconds and sometimes you can only do 2.
Yeah.
And I think one of the keys is to fully recover. I think sometimes that zone 2 work is kind of our soul food. I don't like to give up my long jogs. Like it's my mental health time. And so I think that is important. Sometimes if I know I'm limited in a day or a week, I turn that jog into kind of a walk sprint. So I'm still outside, but I might do some intervals in that instead. There's other things that you can do to increase the intensity of a normal workout, or normal, what you're more consistently doing. If can put on a weighted vest, carry a backpack, things like that to increase the intensity, go up a hill,
right?
Change your pace. So there's, again, we're not saying wipe out the old, come in with all new, but just try some modifications. And that's a really good way to start. And for people, I'm 47 entering this perimenopause state. I'm really trying to make some of these changes now. So they're kind of in my regimen as this process, as this stage of my life continues. Yeah. And so trying to implement little pieces here and there so I don't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to totally revamp this.
Yes.
And I think, the interesting thing is I've noticed changes. I feel like my body composition is already responding in a positive manner, even though I sometimes feel like I'm working out less because I'm actually giving myself time to recover as well.
Yes. I think when I started to play with this, it was postmenopause, and it was because what I had been doing all since stopped working, and so it was hugely energizing to feel like it's not a question of I have to put more minutes into this workout and less eating. It's a question of I need to reconfigure it. And I think the idea of being able to do interval training in a class or in a dance class or on a walk or a run or whatever you're doing, you understand what intervals mean and you could self-regulate.
Right.
So, right. And then it's like also 2 to 3 times a week, recommend to do it.
Yep. And so I think, again, our friend Stacy Simms and other people in this who are super deep in this area, they talk a lot about, I feel like the new buzzword I'm reading a lot and hearing a lot is polarizing your training.
Yes.
So really high and really low. And we're staying out of this gray zone in the middle where most of us have spent most of our athletic exercising days, and kind of going back to this high and low. And it kind of reminds me of my old collegiate athletic days, is like we trained really hard, but then we were really good about resting.
Yeah.
And I feel like you get outside of these, whether it's a team sport or these more controlled environments, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go for a 45-minute jog today. I'm going to do this and this. And we think we're doing everything right. And then all of a sudden it stops working. So these are just a couple ways to reboot your routines that you're doing, to add a little bit different flavors and get to experiment with some of these things and see what sticks and what changes.
Yeah. I think sometimes I get the question, when should I exercise? And I think what we've learned is, again, anytime is good time.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you should exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you can get it done. There's not a bad time to exercise. Mm-hmm. But some of the research that's exciting to me, because I like to exercise in the morning, is you get a 12-hour kicker in your dopamine levels or serotonin levels when you exercise, especially when you do this threat interval training. However, there's also some research out that says you get bigger efficacy for weightlifting in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So that gives you freedom in your calendar and be like, okay, I can mix and match.
Absolutely. And it doesn't all have to be done at the same time. I think that's an important thing too. I think the other thing that comes into play is mobility and balance, and that work that we need to do actively each day. And I know this is a hard thing for me. It's the first thing off the chopping block is doing any sort of mobility or balance. Our friends, Kelly and Julie at Starret, they have a great mobility program, the Ready State, to check out. If they have some great mobility sequences that can be added pre and post workout to really, because, we do have an increased risk of soft tissue injury when we lose estrogen and progesterone. And so it is important that we are taking care of our joints so they continue to do the things we want them to do. So, and I think the concept of mobility it's different than flexibility. Mobility is taking joints through their full range of motion in a controlled setting. So it's different than just stretching the muscles around our joints. It's actually taking those joints through full range of motion.
Awesome. So it can be more effective, more bang for the buck. I keep saying for less time if you're thinking about how to optimize it, how to do it well.
Yeah.
So movement is exercise plus moving through the rest of your day.
Yes.
And that can be the zone 2. That could be the hike. That could be the trail.
Absolutely.
Exercise.
And I think, so many of us work from home now and have these other environments. I know between calls, I walk up and down my stairs a couple of times, or I walk outside and do a lap around my house, like outside, and just to get up and move around, standing desks, walking desks, all of these things. Can you stand up and do 10 squats at your chair? Like there's so many ways to introduce a little bit more movement in the day.
Awesome. Okay. So that was pillar number 1. Pillar number 2.
Pillar number 2. All right. Pillar number 2, my favorite, sleep.
I just want to put a sleep mask on.
I know. I think we should demo.
Yeah. Our deep dive on sleep.
So I think this is, again, it's a mental brain shift. It's a mind shift. As parents, we would never deny our children, especially when they're young, sleep. That time was so special for so many reasons, right? You knew they needed it. It was the time where you were like, okay, I'm done for the day. But I've always thought it was so interesting that we prioritize bedtime routines and wind down routines and consistent sleep schedules for small children. And as we age, we abandon that and we think it's not necessary. And we earn badges of honor for not sleeping, whether that's, in my line of work, up every third night on call, or doing, people that are experiencing are shift workers, and, in the business world.
Oh my gosh, yeah, startup world it was for sure 24/7.
Yeah.
You worked all night, the night at the office, or you worked hard, played hard. So you worked hard, went out all night, then we're up for the presentation at 5 a.m.
Yeah,
that was definitely a stripe.
And then I think, as we get busy, so many things get pushed to the end of the day that you turn around and it's 10, 11, not for me because now I'm an early to bed, but you turn around and it's much later than you thought because you're just finishing up the day. And then we're rushing to bed, and then our sleep quality is poor we get up and we're activated instantaneously, which degrades our sleep right before we wake up. And so I think it is a mind shift that this has to be prioritized.
Yeah. And I think there's been so much conversation about it now that it has become normalized. So you could say to your coworkers, hey, I'm going to bed. And that doesn't seem like a huge alarm bell, which even 5 years ago, that would have been like, I'm sorry, are you sick? Like, what is going on? And so that has been normalized. But I still think it's hard for people to actually understand the mechanics. I mean, yeah, we can all go to sleep and wake up, but the mechanics of that nighttime routine, the consistency, as much as you can, of a time to go to bed and a time to wake up. And then some of the little things you can do to make your environment conducive to actually sleeping through the night.
Absolutely. So let's break a couple of those down quickly. So the consistency is really key. So, we say between 7 and 9 hours of sleep is ideal per night. And there's a reason to that. And there's a reason that consistency is important, as the first 4 hours of sleep, when we're talking about the quality of sleep and our stages of sleep, we kind of go stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And stage 3 is our first stage of deep sleep. And early in the night, that in stage 3 sleep is where we get our growth hormone release, where a lot of our tissue repair happens. And it's very regenerative. And then in the kind of later 4 hours, so, if you go to bed at 9, from 9 to 1 a.m. is that deep sleep, stage 3 sleep. And then from 1 a.m. to, let's say, 6 a.m., 5 a.m., when you wake up, that's when you're getting more into stage 4. That's our REM sleep. That's when we're dreaming. That's really important for learning and memory integration. Throughout the whole night is when we have this amazing newly discovered organ system called the glymphatic system that starts to function. And that's kind of the washing machine for our brains.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. And, cognition is very it's a high energy requirement. And it's very energy expensive, which means there's a lot of byproducts. There's a lot of waste products created. And so we discovered, not me, some brilliant people discovered this system of kind of our neurons actually change size, and it creates some convective waves of our spinal fluid in our brains. And it cleans out a lot of these toxins, some of which are proteins linked to Alzheimer's. And it's really important for us to be able to do that. And it only happens when we're sleeping.
So that the idea of it's 8 hours or 7 and 9, and it's around the same time
Right.
day. And then that kind of gets into the reality of life. Like you got to bed later than you wanted to. You should still get up when you're programmed to. Or, you have to get up at a different time schedule. You still probably want to go to bed early as you can. So that's a little bit of operationalizing it, which is hard. I have found that the eye mask and the white noise are the critical things for me to actually get to sleep. Because even if I am ready to go to bed, someone in our household is not,
right,
or someone out in the street is not. And so the ability to quiet is critical for me to get that sleep started and continue.
So maybe let's go through our kind of list of kind of top things. So to physiologically fall asleep, our bodies have to cool. Then we have to cool about 1.5 degrees. And so if we think about that, there are some ways that we can accelerate that. That's why a warm bath at night is actually very relaxing. Not only is it usually for most people relaxing to take a warm bath or a warm shower, helps just kind of shut things down. It also brings your blood to your surface. And so then the idea is warm bath, then get into a cool bed. So we're thinking 65 to 68 degrees for your bedroom. It's pretty chilly. To get in there and now your blood is at the periphery and you cool down faster.
Okay.
So that can be really helpful. Cold, dark, quiet. Cold, dark, quiet is key. So earplugs, blackout curtains, eye masks, all of those things are really beneficial. We've talked a lot about consistency. I think the other thing is avoiding a big meal close to bed.
Well, I actually have kind of this rule of thumb. It's like 4, 3, 2, 1. So for me, it's 4 hours meal, no more. 3 hours, I'm shutting down any kind of work or any sort of to-dos, which is hard, especially if you and I are talking about, I want to keep talking about it, but I try to shut that down. 2 hours, it's actually screens. And 1 hour, I'm sitting in bed and starting to kind of, unwind.
Yeah.
That is perfect when you describe it. But the reality is that's impossible. Like somebody needs something for a homecoming poster, or somebody needs something for, so there's interruptions to it, but I'm trying to keep that rhythm of stopping with intention early enough to let my body start to know, like the nighttime routine example you gave, that we're going to bed.
Right. We're getting prepared for that. And I think, with that, the screens have gotten a lot of attention. And is it blue light? Is it the content? Is it having a physical device near you that, unfortunately today our devices, or maybe fortunately, are multitaskers.
Right.
And so we might be reading a book quietly on an iPad that has the correct lighting on it, and all of a sudden we just get notifications. And the problem is we're so hardwired to having our devices even in our hands. We get some dopamine hits, which are stimulating. And so they've done experiments with different wavelengths of light, and it's probably actually not the blue light. It's probably the stimulation from the device itself. And so I think, if you can read a book, if you can have softer light, I think that's the other thing is, there is really good information about circadian rhythm and viewing early morning sunlight in the morning, and then avoiding bright light in your eyes in the evening, especially a few hours before bed, to really help regulate that clock as well.
So those are, I think, some great, things to play with. I've also played with a humidifier and with scents.
Yeah.
And both seem to be lovely experiences, but I don't see data change in my aura.
Yeah.
Or my 8 sleep.
Yeah. I think we can't get off this topic without addressing two more things. One is caffeine. So, you can be a fast metabolizer or a slow metabolizer of caffeine. And so just knowing how caffeine affects you and then being able to regulate your caffeine during the day appropriately. So that's one. And then
wait, before this one, because you taught me this about caffeine, is the half-life.
Yeah.
So being able to do the math, because I'm actually a fast metabolizer, so I don't really care. But my husband is not. And so he has to stop and realize the half-life of caffeine that's going to stay in the system.
Yep.
And how long it takes
to break down. Yep. I know for me, I've just kind of cheated and said I try not to have, especially something that's highly caffeinated, like coffee after noon.
Yeah.
I can have a little tea in the afternoon, but that's about it. Okay. And then the one that kind of breaks our hearts is alcohol.
Yeah.
So we are wine drinkers. We admit it. It's hard. And I think that alcohol is, we know it degrades sleep. It degrades the quality of sleep. And people often, because it's a sedative, and people say, oh, I fall asleep much faster, but it really does degrade the quality of your sleep. It contributes to those 2, 3 a.m. wake ups. And as we get older, especially as women, we lose the ability to metabolize it as efficiently. So it affects our sleep more and more. So I think it's one of those very personal decisions, like all of these things. I know if I have a glass of wine, what it's going to do to my sleep, and it becomes situational dependent on whether I want to take that risk or not.
Right. There's if you wear a wearable, there's zero doubt in your mind that all your metrics get dinged. So you operate with what you know and what you prioritize. All right.
Okay. So number 3,
nourishment. Okay. So you move, you sleep, but you got to do this all day, every day. Everybody does.
Yeah.
We
got to eat.
What do we do? Eat and drink.
So I think, there's a lot of attention around protein. Yeah. I think there's what you need to survive. I think there's really idealistic goals. And I think most of us probably, if we end up somewhere in the middle, we're doing a really good job.
I think this is a great example of, aim for the stars, or, aim for the moon, you'll reach a star kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you aim for these new levels, you'll be so much better than you were before. The takeaway, as I tried to put this in a day-to-day lifetime, it's like, okay, lots of protein, no doubt. I probably shoot for 100 grams a day, okay? 3 meals a day. That's about 30 grams a meal. And there's an opportunity to make that be more effective by when we eat it. Talk about that. But the other thing that I think was new news for me is it's about getting the 30 grams in one sitting, right? So you don't benefit if you're dripping it with a handful of nuts over here and a scoop of almond butter over there and 2 eggs in the morning. It might add up to the grams of protein, but you didn't get to that activation quantity.
Yeah.
So you took in a lot of effort and, calories, and it didn't really do what you wanted it to do.
Yeah.
That was a big change in how I did the 100 grams of protein a day.
Yeah. And you are definitely more regimented than I am on that. And, I think that's definitely still a work in progress for me, as one is I just usually don't care for protein heavy food.
Right.
So it's challenging to adapt your diet. People that prefer a vegetarian or a vegan diet, it's even more challenging. So yeah, I think that there are times, we know as women, especially perimenopausal women, our cortisol levels are high in the morning. And when we lose estrogen's feedback that we're awake now, and the pulsatile nature of estrogen throughout the day, even, then we need other signals to our body that nourishment's coming, the cortisol can be ramped down. and foods of protein especially is a key signaler of that. And so it is important that we eat something in the morning. And we're not going to go into fasting and time restricted feeding right now, but just, putting something in your mouth to let your body know, oh, fuel's coming. I'm prepared. I don't need to panic. Big stimulus to your hypothalamus to kind of kick in and say, okay, we're okay.
We're going to settle down.
Yeah, we're going to settle down. So, and lower those cortisol levels. And then we've also found for women, there was this idea, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, the group I was working with, we were really looking into that anabolic window post-exercise. And I was working with a group of men. And I kind of like all the research was saying, it sounds like it's pretty elongated. And for men, it is, they can exercise or do a workout and have a good 2.5, almost even 3 hours until it's really kind of critical that they refuel some of the fuel that they've consumed. For women, especially our perimenopausal and postmenopausal women, that time frame is much, much smaller before our body goes back into this low energy kind of panic and starts breaking down instead of building all the work we just did.
Not that they're trying to skip a meal. They're just not hungry, or they're then getting their kids out the door, or they're rushing out to work. And so the idea that you can remind yourself, I'm doing my metabolism a favor by feeding it first thing in the morning. It might be not the way you want to always feed a protein shake or protein powder in your coffee, but it is better than skipping it and waiting to have a meal at 11 o'clock when all of a sudden your body won't let you forget that you're hungry.
Right. Absolutely. So, I think trying to, for most people, get as much protein as you can. It's hard to overdo it with what the new recommendations are. I think the same thing, healthy fats are really important. And luckily that has gotten a lot of attention. And I think we've kind of gone past this like high carb, high sugar, or sugar substitutes. I remember like in high school, it was like the Snackwell cookies, and that was so healthy, right? Like these terrible, terrible processed foods that had no nutritional value. So I think, for Nourish is protein, whole foods. And we use this example a lot, shop the perimeter of the grocery store. And if you're buying 80% to 90% of your groceries on the perimeter of the grocery store, you're filling your basket with whole healthy foods.
Yep.
Of good variety. We aim for colors on plates, kind of all of those simple tricks.
Block and tackle. I know sugar is a big one for everybody, and it's hard to say, no sugar, but one of the most effective things can be not drinking your sugar.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Food, strawberry banana juice. It's just all of that.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then also I think for the mindset part of this, it's not always about what you are not doing, but like what you are adding in.
Yeah.
If you can start with what do I add in and then get to what you take out.
Yeah.
That could be a sustainable way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can make it fun. I know, we've tried different things at home. Like somebody gets to pick something exotic at the grocery store. We may not even know what it is, but we're going to try to cook with it. Or, family meal planning in different ways, and introducing new things all the time also kind of makes everybody kind of creative and fun, and you kind of find some things that maybe you didn't really know before. Perfect.
Cool.
Okay.
Third one.
Fourth one.
Fourth one.
Who's
counting? Okay. Fourth one.
Community. And we cannot state this enough in the fact that we have to connect with other humans. And if we can do it outside in nature, even better, but that having a sense of community contributes to our sense of purpose. Having a sense of purpose keeps us going. So having connection.
And in-person connection. So the chemical exchange really matters. I think we all lived that through COVID with Zoom. And, even though these studies have been discussed in many outlets, I think they are so worth repeating. And that is the Harvard study or the Boston Boys study, the nun study that was, I think it was in South America. But it was basically two different populations, two different set of criteria and environments, and longitudinal studies over multiple generations, tracking with great data codification, reading the journals from nuns and codifying what those journals said, and finding what contributed to long-term happiness. And the factor that was consistent in all those populations over time was a feeling of connection and relationship, positive relationships. So the expression, you are the 5 people in your head, average of 5 people you spend time with. I think my father-in-law says it best, which is, pick your drinking partner wisely.
Yeah.
So you are the company you keep. And so that now, I think in today's age, is not so much about just the people, but it's also the media you consume, the the time on social media, the TV shows you watch. So everything that you're putting into your mind is part of your relationships that you're maintaining, and curating those with intent and giving them the ones that are uplifting and the ones you're trying to keep amplified in your life, giving them time with intention on your calendar is a key to thrive.
And I think, we have, we've gotten away, and sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing because it can keep us connected. But I think taking the time to pick up the phone, if it's not someone that you see every day, and actually have a conversation, or even better, if you can like FaceTime someone and have a connection. Like there's so many ways to connect that I think it's really pivotal. And I think sometimes we feel like we're bothering someone. I was having a conversation with my dear friend Rainey the other day, and she's like, I'm just going to call you. And I'm like, you can always just, and I think we have gotten in this habit of asking permission if people have time. And I think there's something so special about getting a spontaneous phone call from a friend that just, and I have a couple friends that do this really well. They just call and say hi.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's always like, it warms my heart. It like, even if I just get their voicemail, I'm like, they thought enough about me today to pick up the phone and call. And I think that we kind of lost
voicemails back and forth with each other.
Yeah.
It's a conversation. And even better if you can do the FaceTime while you're walking and talking outside.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, and it is interesting how this threads into longevity. If you look at some of the blue zones around the world that have these concentrations of people that live long, healthy lives, there is a huge sense of community. Some are even more tribal in nature, but I think it's just shown over hundreds of years, the importance.
Yes. And then I think Arthur Brooks' work brought a lot of this to light, but the idea that as we get into midlife and beyond, seeing that there is something greater than ourselves, whatever words you want to use for it, spirituality, it could be universe, it could be nature, but that is part of that connection and community definition in that category of thriving is having connection to something that is bigger than yourself, some presence. And so I know we're going to have some fun conversations and episodes of.
Absolutely. And I think that brings out such a good point is we're both parents of teenagers and seeing them in their kind of very appropriately so like self-centered phases that they're in, and that's just their stage of development. And I oftentimes, you just want to kind of say, life is so much bigger than this. Like, you don't need to worry about this. You are a small part of something that's really large and wonderful, but they're so egocentric at that point in time that they can't quite embrace those concepts. But I think that is true. And, it's interesting in a way that takes some of the pressure off.
Yeah.
Right? That you just kind of almost gain a sense of confidence that, you know what, I am part of something big. If I make a mistake or I don't do something right, you know what, it's not going to matter.
Yeah. It's a much larger canvas.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's top 4 real quick.
Okay.
Move.
Sleep.
Nourish. Connect. All right. Thanks, you guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.